Welcome back to Pianokeys Academy. I'm Michael Finley, and we are concluding our arm impulse series today with forward arm impulses, as I learned them from my teacher Marc Durand at the University of Montreal. Please check out the other two videos if you haven't already. So the beauty of forward impulses is that it involves the entire body and provides a lot of control over the mechanism of the piano. I want to begin with a few words about proper posture at the piano. And for that, as we so often do, let's begin with just a little bit of anatomy. When the spine sits in balance, the vertebrae of the lower torso support the smaller vertebrae that are stacked on top of them. Going down from the neck, each vertebrae is slightly larger than the one above it because it has more weight to support. It works best when it is stacked, with no portion of it overly burdened. When seated, the weight of the body is distributed to the bench via the two bony prominences at the base of the pelvis, sometimes referred to as the sit bones. Staying with this image of a perfectly stacked vertebral column delivering weight into the bench via the sit bones, try to move the spine as a unit from the pelvis. When the spine does its job properly, it supports the weight of your upper body. One thing that happens when we have poor posture is that this support is compromised, meaning that the postural muscles have to pick up the slack, causing them to tighten, and it causes pain and reduced mobility. This is an oversimplification, but I like to think of it this way. The job of the bones is to support weight, and the job of muscles is to move those bones. When I first teach students to connect their bodies to the piano, I ask them to pretend they need to push a piano forward from a seated position, like this. So notice how you brace your body in order to do this. First, you ground yourself. Your feet are a little bit spread, and the base of your pelvis supports the weight of your upper body. Your spine, as we discussed, stacks in order to withstand the force. Notice too that the shoulder complex is the fulcrum, absorbing the force you are exerting on the piano. But the main thing I want you to notice is how much power you really have. You're leveraging the weight of your entire torso into the piano, enough to actually move it. So we have access to this reserve of force at the piano all the time. That is, if we know how to use it. We can convert our body weight into kinetic energy to accelerate the key with great efficiency, so that even very small people can make a huge sound. I am unfortunately not one of those very small people, but at any rate, it really is a very efficient way to make a big sound, and also because we are going forward instead of down, we aren't barreling towards the bottom of the key, but we can precisely target the point of sound. Let's see this movement again. I initiate the movement at the center of the body, which carries my torso forward and the arms with it. So I begin to lean forward with the whole body, and then I follow through with the elbow. The arms and fingers get an assist from the momentum generated from the forward movement of the torso. This is kind of like in baseball, when a pitcher winds up in order to involve his whole body to launch the ball with much more force than the arm itself would be capable of. I follow through, forward and up, from the keys up. Moving forward, in general, straightens the arms and takes them upward. And it takes me directly out of the instrument. And a really nice side effect of this is I barely feel the bottom of the key. It's almost like I'm skimming the top of the key, in fact. So despite the large amount of sound being generated, it's almost like my fingers never strike the bottom of the key. So it feels very light and very effortless. Okay, now let's do the same thing with single notes. Principle is the same. I initiate from the center of the body, follow through with the elbow. So the follow through is absorbed by the knuckle. only the knuckle, so the wrist does not flex at all. And I'm not sliding on the key. Some people misunderstand that you should be playing something like this. So my finger remains planted in the same spot, but I play the finger with the support of this entire kinetic chain beginning from the pelvis. So what we're really talking about here is leverage. Obviously, you aren't going to be gyrating your hips on every note that you play. But what you should feel is that there's a connection that goes all the way from the base of the pelvis to the tip of the finger. Last time we talked about the alignment of the forearm, hand, and finger. And in this case, we're extending that alignment all the way down to our base of support, the sit bones. By the way, if you don't feel your sit bones when you rock back and forth like this, you're probably tilted towards the back. Your pelvis is probably in a back-oriented position. So try rocking it forward until you feel those two sit bones underneath you. So the kinetic chain goes from the base of the pelvis through the spinal column, the shoulder complex, elbow, wrist, and finally finger. Working together, this makes for a very efficient way to accelerate the hammer. So efficient, actually, that you have to be careful because it's very easy to go overboard and play with a harsh sound. Actually, unlike the other kinds of arm impulses we've talked about, the downward impulses and the rotations of the Talbot approach, which also are down-oriented, I'm not forcing to the bottom of the key in this case. In fact, I barely feel the bottom of the key, but I'm still getting a harsh sound simply because the hammer is traveling too fast when it hits the string. And when that happens, it flattens against the string, dampening some of the overtones that would contribute to a good sound. The good news is that once you learn to connect to the center of the body like this, it gives you a lot of control over your sound. So it's like a spectrum of weight versus weightlessness. I feel like I can choose exactly how much weight to release into the piano, giving me immense control over the sound. As with the other kinds of arm impulses, it's all about controlling the mechanism of the piano. So I like to concentrate on the part of key descent where I have the most control over the acceleration of the hammer, which is right around the point of sound. I've mentioned the point of sound in a couple of videos now, so let's take a quick look at what that means. If you depress a key on a grand piano slowly, you will feel a little notch about 7 millimeters into key descent, and between 1 and 2 millimeters above the key bed. Watch this little L-shaped piece here. This is called the jack. When the toe of the jack reaches the let-off button, it causes the jack to slip forward, creating friction with the knuckle, or roller, and launching the hammer upwards. The launch happens at the bump, the point of sound. That means the remaining portion of key descent, the aftertouch, contributes nothing to the sound. The sound has already been made by the time you reach the key bed. The point in key descent where we have the most control is when the jack is exerting friction on the knuckle. To find the point of sound, it helps to practice doubling each note. And the reason is that the key doesn't have time to come up. So it really zeroes in on that exact spot where the sound is made. And it has the added benefit of reinforcing the alignment of forearm, hand, and finger, and the rest of the chain behind each finger that plays. Because it's hard to get it to ricochet like that if you're not lined up properly. So this whole approach is wonderful for feeling secure, grounded, and connected at the piano. And I have another observation about it. I find that grounding myself and involving the lower body in this way helps me manage my anxiety and other emotions on stage. Now, hear me out on this one. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been playing on stage and you get to your favorite part, the climax of the piece, and you're just so excited, and then you screw it up? I bet you have, because that's happened to all of us, I think. Because when we get emotionally involved in a piece, it can sometimes interfere with the playing. In my first video, I talked about the value of opening up your chest in order to free the shoulder. But there's a second reason to think of opening up your posture. When we feel anxiety or excitement, there is a physical manifestation of those emotions in our body. Our heart rate might quicken, our breathing might get shallower, and we start to feel tension in the chest, which closes down our posture, restricting our movements and making us less agile in general, especially at the piano. But if you try to think of experiencing these emotions lower in the body, open your posture, sit tall at the piano, deepen your breathing. It frees your upper body to play. That way, emotional tension in the music doesn't convert into physical tension. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this series on arm impulses. My reason for starting the channel this way with 3 different takes on the same concept is pretty simple. I think all 3 approaches contribute something valuable, and they all target different parts of the body, and they help me in their own way. They can also be combined in certain ways. There's no reason, for example, that if you're practicing with rotations, that you can't add a little bit of forward impulse from the body. It's my firm belief that no one approach to technique has a monopoly on good ideas. I'm something of a pluralist. I've had a lot of wonderful teachers who gave me sometimes conflicting information about technique, and that was sometimes confusing, but I think at the end of the day, that diversity of influence has made me a stronger pianist, not weaker. So it makes sense to me to have as big a toolkit as possible. Of course, as Carl Sagan once said, you don't want to be so open-minded that your brain falls out. So let me be clear, there are also a lot of bad ideas out there, some of which can literally cause you injury. But if an idea helps me sound better and agrees with my understanding of how the body and the piano function, why not use it? Just something to think about. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy practicing.